Hello, football fans. I'm Jeremy,
And I'm Josh.
and we are the Dads of Football podcast here. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming. For some of you that haven't seen my post, I put it up on the community. Also, make sure to like and subscribe since this is our first real podcast on the Dads of Football YouTube channel. But some of you may be confused, like, hey, didn't that guy talk about boxing? Yes, I did. For just about I don't know, 11 years I did it, but on the YouTube channel, it was just for a couple. But passions change, and I found myself kind of out of love with the boxing journalism game. And it was because of you, Josh, that I got back into football, and you gave me this idea. Hey, let's do it on YouTube. Let's talk football
Yep.
since we pretty much do that anyway. So that's what we're doing here. And we've got a great foundation with the people that are following us right now, and we hope to make it grow. So go out, check us out on our socials. I've got the link right up there, and click it and see what we got going on.
Love it.
Uh,
Love it.
we've we've got our topic for today, which is the Super Bowl 58 aftermath. Obviously, we both watched the game. The world watched the game. A lot's
Yes.
happened. Josh, where do you want to start with the aftermath? What's the first topic?
I think you and I talked about this a little bit earlier, but the fact that, following the game, I think we both felt like the Chiefs probably went in, yes, as the underdogs, according to Vegas. I think we both kind of felt like they'd probably take the title, but to see the first thing that really happened, I actually believe it was on the same day as the Chiefs parade. Coach Wilks was removed from the 49ers staff, despite the fact that the day before and the day before that, Coach Shanahan said that they weren't going to make any changes. All the coaches were coming back. So kind of interesting to see the guy that takes the biggest hit was probably the guy that kept him in the game, at least the side of the ball that kept him in the game. So
Now, here's the thing.
pretty
So
surprised.
so they put it forward like, okay, like you said. I mean, basically, let's call it for what it is. Shanahan lied. He
Yeah.
said, "I'm not going to change coaching
Yeah.
staff," and then he fires a coach right after
Yes.
that. So
Yes.
we can call him a liar, maybe a guy that we shouldn't trust. And then the
Yes.
reason comes out that, hey, I think he's a great guy. He's a wonderful human being. It's just philosophical differences. Are we buying
Yep.
that?
It's hard to buy that in a season where the 49ers defense was so solid all year long, right? You're watching games, they're keeping him in. Yes, Brock Purdy's doing what he does. They've got other weapons on offense. McCaffrey is McCaffreying, if you will. But that defense was fantastic all year long. Now it seems like they had their beefs with one another. I think you and I talked about this earlier in the week, but or last week, I should say. But it seems like at some point in time they took him out of the booth, and next thing you know, he's now been removed. So I don't know that I buy it. I feel like post Super Bowl, you're kind of mum's the word. You hope a couple of days create separation, and the next thing you know, you're letting the DC go, who in many categories was top three in the league. So
I think it's going to be one of those things where one of those assistants, many of whom aren't going to be there, if we're talking about Coach Lynn and some of the
right.
other guys, they're all going off to different spaces.
Oh yeah.
Um, one of them, once they're not employed anymore, is gonna sit down and talk with someone and say, what
For
exactly
sure.
happened between Shanahan and Wilks? There has to be something there where they must have just not mixed.
I mean, it seems like, I mean, you would think in a year where they were, what, third in points allowed per game, fifth in takeaways, eighth in total yards. I misspoke earlier when I said top three, I meant top 10. Um, but, by all accounts, they were the best team in the NFC for majority of the year, right? And at the end of the year, you get rid of Wilks. You're watching all of these other coaches now step away, go to other places. You just wonder what can the Niners really do when they have to start again with their coaching staff, because I think that's one of the things that has made the Shanahan teams so strong. And I get it, replacing D'Amico Ryans is impossible, right? He's coach of the year in the NFL. I mean, you would think, or at the very least, he's in that conversation. Um, and Wilkes was in a tough spot. Well, now you're removing other guys, and you're moving on. And what's that going to look like for the Niners?
Well, and I think that no matter who they have there, now they're talking about Brandon Staley,
Yeah,
former head coach of the Chargers coming in. I don't know. Listen, I'm sure he's good at what he does in terms of
right,
defense, and he would be walking into a situation that hopefully he couldn't screw it up. I mean, that defense is
right.
so good, and I don't think that the majority of those guys are going to be gone. I think most of them are coming back, and I guess this is our transition to talking about what the 49ers look like next year, starting on the defensive end of the ball. The only guy that I can think of, well, first of all, that we know we're not going to see right away, is Dre Greenlaw. I mean, he tore his ACL running onto the field, and I'm laughing. I shouldn't be laughing, but
It's terrible.
I mean, I couldn't help it when I saw it happen. I'm like,
Yeah.
are you kidding me? Like, and we've heard guys do stuff like this before, but not in a Super Bowl.
No, and not before the game even starts, right? We've had the myriad of kickers that have over the years, celebrating, throwing their hands up. They mess up something in their lower body. But for a guy like that, who spectacular athlete, great in coverage, get ready to go sprinting onto the field, plants his foot and boom, and just like that Aaron Rodgers injury, when they zoomed in, you could see it, right? You could see that muscle contract, and it's incredible to me. I'm always blown away when professional athletes have injuries like that because it doesn't seem to make sense with just how spectacular, um, the shape that they're in. It's amazing. So
And the only way that they are going to lose guys off of that defense is if they choose to lose them.
at this point,
Basically, at this point, because all those guys, for the most part, their main players are still under contract. They lack cap space, and I think that's kind of the crazy thing when you look at their salary cap right now. They
yeah,
only have like 600 grand in salary cap space. So the fact that they're going to be bringing in a whole class of rookies throughout the draft.
yep,
They have a number of draft picks. Not like they're lacking in draft capital here.
right,
So and you have their guys that they're not going to resign. Things like that can shift a little bit, but there's a
right,
chance that they could cut some of their starters, which is possible. I mean, there's at least one or two guys that they've talked about the possibility of doing that, or even on the offensive side
yeah,
of the ball too. Um,
yeah,
but bottom line is, what do you do with Dre Greenlaw, considering that he's only got 1 year left on his contract? Do you let that contract pay out and basically he maybe plays for you at the very end of the season? Because
yeah.
is someone gonna trade for him at this point?
I would think. I mean, what's he? 27 years old, right? Dre Greenlaw is
I think
27,
he's actually only 26 as of right now.
26. I
But
mean,
with the busted knee, I don't know.
yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what they do when you have a guy like that that's as talented as he is, who's part of, for me, between he and Fred Warner, you've got two of the best linebackers, at least tandem in football, right? But how do you keep a guy where you're hoping he comes back to full speed at the end of the year when that's when you need to start humming? That's when you need to start getting into cruise control, and you throw him back in the mix, full or not. Do you owe him that? Is that something that they owe? Because they still have to deal with, to your point, um, not a whole lot of money to spend, especially considering you've got Ayuk coming up on his 5th year, correct?
Yes. So the extension, which they already have in place. So I mean,
Right.
they could keep them. They could roll into that if they're
Yep.
not dealing in good faith in a negotiation beyond that. He could just make their life a living hell and say, you know what, you're not going to show me the money, then
Right.
I'm not going to give you 100. Now that would also look really bad for other teams if he decided to go that route.
Yes. I you would think Ayuk keeps his mouth shut. He knows what the advantages that he has to staying there, right? He's a weapon for them. They're going to get him the ball. He's going to have every opportunity to play deep into the season, into the playoffs, at least the next few years. Although, to our point earlier, right, you're losing a bunch of coaches for a variety of reasons, going to the Commanders. You start wondering, is he going to be around? Will he force the situation, or will they trade him?
I
I know John Lynch talked about, prioritizing players, and Brandon's been fantastic and all of that. What is that going to look like long term for him?
See, and again, it might come down. I get the business end, and I think people forget about the
Yeah.
business end that, okay, all right, if we have 600,000 now that doesn't mean the next year in 2025 that they're not going to have more money for the guy. They're going to have more pieces that fall off the plate.
Yep.
If the math works, you extend the guy, you keep him there. I would think you have to. I mean, he's a legit number one receiver. He had 1,300 receiving yards.
Yep.
He's a go-to guy. Plus, he doesn't want to have to upend his life to begin with, all over again and do all that over again. But it's all going to come down to the amount of money that they have available and what he really thinks he's worth and what he can get. I mean, let's put it this way. He is not a top 5 receiver in the NFL.
No, no. But is he a top 25? I mean, he's a guy that we know has the speed to, work his way downfield. He doesn't appear to be afraid on the in-breaking routes. And he doesn't appear to be afraid of contact. So, I mean, that leaves him in the top 25. You really want to part with a guy like that and hope that you can replace him with a rookie or with another free agent? I mean,
I'd put him top 10 to 15.
really?
Yeah, I would say so. Um, I think I think he's trending in the right direction. He was a guy that I loved when he was
Yes.
coming out of college.
Okay.
And here's the other thing too. There have been some silly things that people are talking about. I mean, people have been doubting. I'm going to switch directions here for a second. Have been doubting Brock
Right.
Purdy for a long time, and
Yes.
obviously you can see behind me. I've got the Iowa sign. There's no love lost for me and Brock
Right.
Purdy. He's not my favorite guy. Statistically, looking at him on paper, it's hard to get much better than what he's doing
Yep.
right now. It's actually kind of shocking. He's top 5 in most categories right now.
Yes.
For a guy that was the very last pick of the NFL draft, you're not going to get a cheaper guy than that over the next few
No.
years. So
No.
you're making out like a bandit having that type of quarterback giving you the production. You're
Yes.
There's no reason to go out and find someone else. So anyone that says that they need to get a different body in there is crazy.
He gave you 4,300 yards. He's accurate. He stays in the pocket and takes hits when necessary. And it appears, for all intents and purposes, that his teammates love him. That they're looking to play for him. To be honest with you, I think a big part of Ayuk's production has been his ability to deliver on target passes to a strong athletic receiver like Ayuk. But I think Brock Purdy is way underrated, or at the very, very least, I think there are people that undervalue what he's been able to do in a pretty short time. And I get the system argument. I do. But you still have to do it. You still have to complete the passes. You still have to step up in the pocket and deliver the ball. You have to work off schedule. I mean, off platform, all of those buzzy phrases that exist now, he does and has shown the ability to do. So to dismiss what he's been able to do, right, would be, I think, negligent. You know, I,
Well,
I think
and, and,
he's,
and Cam Newton came out and said he's a game manager. His numbers aren't
yeah,
that of a game manager, which I think is
no,
just silly when you look at the full spectrum of it.
yeah. So the game manager tag, I think, is fascinating, right? And I know that this has been talked about kind of ad nauseum in the football world, but to claim that, for Cam Newton to claim that, because maybe he's not as hyper athletic, maybe he doesn't do some of the things that some of the other quarterbacks are able to do, maybe because he's smaller. I get all that. However, you throw for 4,300 yards. Um, you're a top guy in nearly every category, or one of the top guys in nearly every category. How do you argue that he's just a game manager? I would argue for a good chunk of that Super Bowl that his ability to work again in the pocket, out of the pocket, deliver accurate passes was the reason why they led for a chunk of the game. I mean, I think that's a big part of it. And to dismiss that, I think Cam Newton is more than likely just kind of taking a look at the fact that, maybe the flash isn't quite there. 4,300 is 4,300. I mean, I don't think that's arguable.
I'm going to give a hot take here. When looking at the Kansas City Chiefs and the San Francisco 49ers, what they're going into this offseason with, uh, I think if you ask me right now, based on what's there and what they tend to be able to get through the draft, which
Mhm.
of these two Super Bowl teams could end up going back to the Super Bowl? I would say the 49ers have a better chance than the Kansas City Chiefs.
Oof. Um, To be honest with you, I think next year we get a rematch. I'm not going to argue against that. I love what Kyle Shanahan does. I don't love how they handled Wilks. I don't really um, like the fact that for 2 days he tells you nothing's happening and then something happens. I'm not a big fan of that. To your point, I feel like that's misleading at the very least. Um, but I do feel like the Niners are going to be tough to beat. And I understand, someone will argue Cowboys, someone will argue, well, Jordan Love and the Packers, they're coming. I get all of that. I do. Um, but the Niners are pretty dang good. And what Kyle Shanahan's been able to do with that offense, you return Christian McCaffrey, who is an obvious offensive just superstar. I mean, he's what you look for in a football player. So
Well, and really, if you look at what they really need, they don't need that much. I mean, they almost
no,
won the Super Bowl. I mean, they
right,
lost it overtime. Again, we're not going to
right,
talk about the coaching aspect of that part of it. But if you look at what they
right.
really need, a tackle, you get an offensive tackle,
Yep.
maybe someone that can help you on the edge of your defensive line, and maybe one guy that can catch 300 yards his rookie season.
I mean, what are they? 31st pick in the draft? Is that where we're at with
Yeah,
the Niners for next year?
yes. So that's where they're
I
at. And
mean,
on
that's
top
where
of
they get
that,
their edge rusher, right? That's where they get that kid, probably from Missouri, right? What's it, Darius Robinson?
well, and
Um,
here's what's interesting. A lot of places are talking about them getting a tackle first under the
yeah,
event that if you're going to look at production, they're talking about McKivitz not having that
right.
great of the postseason. He let up a bunch of sacks. He might be one of those guys that they don't bring back and that they decide to cut, or they just want a guy that is me and you both looked at the tackles that are coming out of this draft and how deep
Yes,
they are. So if you
yes,
need a first rounder type of tackle, there's going to be one there. There's going to probably be one in the second
yeah.
round as well. That's going to be a starting offensive tackle, just maybe not later in the first round. I could see them taking a tackle in the first pick.
Wouldn't shock me if you're talking out on the 31st pick, right? Especially as you and I talked about, the depth there alone might dictate that they can do that. Um, However, I mean, to your point, they do need another edge rusher, at least somebody that can. I mean, let's say they lose Greenlaw, right? Not
Mm-hmm.
to say that he's an edge rusher, but I mean, you're going to need some substance on that edge that much more. So to give that up would be awfully difficult. I mean, a tackle wouldn't be shocking. I think you're dead on. I think that's as you and I looked at the depth there and the sheer volume of tackles that are there. But then you throw in the fact that everyone's so excited about some of these quarterbacks, some of these receivers that are coming out. They might have a pick of two tackles when they get to the 31st. So maybe they don't have to, go D end right out of the gates in that first round. They could wait. So
And as we get to the end of this video, let's take a look at the Kansas City Chiefs here and what
yeah,
they have and what they're going to lose. I mean, we talked a lot about the 49ers. The Chiefs, the one area that they obviously are better, they're going to be in a better position. Cap space. I think they're at like 23 million that they're going to
correct.
have. So if you're at 23 million, that'll buy you some pieces, but the two pieces that they're going to need to extend or they're going to need to sign because they haven't signed them yet. You've
Right.
got L'Jarius Sneed and you got Chris Jones, who are both free agents if you don't sign those two guys. And 23 million is great. It's not going to be enough to keep both those guys.
No, no. I mean, L'Jarius Sneed. I mean, you're talking about one of the most dynamic cornerbacks in the NFL, right? Chris Jones, phenomenal defensive tackle, obvious superstar. Neither of those guys can be replaced. I mean, so if you're going to choose, um, do you go with a Chris Jones over a L'Jarius Sneed and hope, as we've seen recently, and not just in drafts, but with pieces moving around, can you get a cornerback free agent? Can you find someone in the draft and keep Chris Jones and the importance of that defensive tackle?
I think it's a lot easier to replace a corner than it is to replace a D
Agreed.
tackle. So
Agreed.
you're going to have, I mean, D tackles, I mean, there aren't too many top notch
No.
blue chip D tackles in the NFL right now. And no offense to the guys out there, but if I'm looking around saying, where's
Yeah.
that next Hall of Famer? There's not a ton of those guys. Um, I don't think there's a ton in this
No.
draft, to be honest with you. I think that in most drafts, either
Right.
this draft or the next 2 or 3, D tackles are always going to be shallow. I mean,
Yes.
you got a guy like Chris Jones, you do whatever you can to hold on to him. You can find another corner, maybe not as
Yeah.
good as Snead, but you can find another corner that'll be a lot less money and can still play the position and still get you decent results.
Right. And I just wonder how much for the Chiefs, um, it's going to come down to who's the heart and soul of your defense. And not say,
Mhm.
Snead is not, but Chris Jones, every time they show him picking up teammates, high fiving guys on and off the field, he just strikes me as a guy that's one of your emotional leaders. So to your point, if you can go and get a cornerback elsewhere and you keep a guy like Chris Jones and you don't upend what might be the chemistry of your defense, especially because finding interior guys has become so difficult now. I don't think you do that. I think you have to hold on to Jones, and Snead sadly ends up being, someone you say goodbye to.
And I'll say this: Chiefs don't have a ton of picks in the draft. They have 6, but hey, that
Yeah.
just means you got to make them count. you
Yeah.
know, I mean, there's no other
Well,
way to
and
look at it.
I mean, I think one of the things the Chiefs have shown though on both sides of the ball is one, because they're so well coached, but two, the culture there is built around maybe not necessarily next man up. I think that might be misleading and probably an overstatement, but they have guys that want to go in there and compete. And that's the thing about the Chiefs that I think makes them great. I think that's what Andy Reid did with the Eagles before. I think that is what he's done with the Chiefs now in this current dynasty period for the Chiefs is they compete all the time. So they're going to go find guys. They're going to want to get in there. They're going to want to play until the whistle blows, and they're just going to give you everything they've got. I mean, that's unquestionably why they continue to win.
Final word here. Final thing I'm going to say, and then before we sign off here, uh, as far as the Kansas City Chiefs, statistically, maybe one of the worst Super Bowl winning teams in the last 10 years. I said it before and I'll say it again.
Yeah,
If you look just from the players that they have and the stats that they have, I mean, it's kind of
yeah,
incredible that this team won a Super Bowl. I mean, look across the board. Mahomes, not his best season, still good. I mean, anytime you throw for 4,200 yards, yeah, you're
right,
going to be a stud. But I mean, Brock Purdy's numbers were better. They didn't have 1,000-yard rusher. They didn't have 1,000-yard receiver.
right.
This was, I think, Travis Kelce's first time since 2015 not having 1,000-yard receiving season.
Yes.
I mean, they were pretty mid in all those categories, but Mahomes and his leadership, they found a way to win.
I mean, again, isn't that the hallmark of great teams, right? And great players for that matter. I think that's why when you talk about Mahomes, in spite of the fact that obviously he's just at the beginning, we'll call it the beginning third of his career, if he has any kind of career like Tom Brady did, obviously, but um, the guy finds ways to win. The team finds ways to win. Andy Reid finds ways to win. I mean, I think that at the end of the day, when Andy Reid is retired, that's what you're going to talk about, right? With Belichick, you talk about the excellence on the defensive side of the ball. You talk about what he was able to do with Tom Brady and how the chemistry between the two of them led to what it led to. You look at the Chiefs, you look at Andy Reid, you look at what they've done. Clearly, they've got Mahomes, but it is just the resilience that they continue to show. And Mahomes was probably playing his best football in the playoffs. I mean, what are you going to do with that? You got a guy who is probably, I don't even think it's probably anymore. It's almost like unquestionably the most gifted quarterback ever. Maybe he's not as fast out of the pocket as Lamar Jackson, but when you put all the pieces together, you look at what he's done so far. How do you even argue? I mean, they are just a resilient team. Um, so yes, they might be of the Super Bowl teams in the last 10 years. All the Chiefs iterations of Super Bowl champions, absolutely. Um, but they don't give up. They
And,
That's a hallmark.
and if they want to get there, they're going to need Jones's 10 and a half sacks more than Snead's 2
Yes.
interceptions. So
Yes.
that's the cap right there on
Yes.
that whole discussion. Josh, episode 1, man.
Fantastic. It's
I
been a
think that's
riot.
it. Hey, thank you
Yes, I'm
everyone.
feeling
Make
good.
sure to guys like and subscribe, and we'll hit you again with a new video soon. Josh, thank you as always, my man.
Jeremy, always good time.